Um, there's a few guests I've had on the show who have mentioned the value of optimism as their main
Hmm.
value, and I think there might be a connection there. I'm curious your take on it because the way they explained it is that no matter how bad things get, no matter how horrible it is, and I had somebody on the show who lived in Cambodia at the time
Hmm.
of the concentration camps and lived there.
Right.
And she was one of the people that brought it up. And the idea was no matter how bad things are, even if you don't know if it's going to get better, optimism is important because what other choice do you have? You have to just believe it's going to get better and keep moving forward. And I wonder if that's not maybe the other side of the same coin of courage, where to your point, um, what choice do you have in some instances but to be courageous? And I think your life story is an example of this.
Sure.
So I wonder that, and I guess it begs the maybe philosophical question of what really is courage? Is it what we typically think of, which is something you don't have to do, but you kind of conjure up the courage and the bravery to do it? Or do you see it more as courage is really just doing the thing you have to do in that moment and just carrying forward with it, if that makes sense?
I think it's doing the thing you have to do in that moment, and going forward. Most definitely, yes, it's tied to optimism. Optimism, we can talk more about that in a moment. But the only difference is some people don't do what they have to do in the moment.
Yeah, that's true. So they don't do what they have to do in the moment. And if you look at it through that optimism lens, they don't do it because they believe things aren't going to work out. They believe it's not worth it to be courageous. So is it less about bravery or courage and more about a belief that things can get better? I guess that's ultimately the question I'm trying to ask. Do you think it's like, what do you think is the
I
root of some people being courageous and some people not?
I think it's more complicated than a simple choice of
Mm,
optimism or not. I think it goes right back to the way one is brought up, childhood, what one experienced, lessons one learned from one's parents, other figures of either authority or inspiration, how one has lived one's life, whether one has overcome lower levels or lower degrees of adversity and built up resistance, resilience, and that resilience certainly, I think, enables courage. And one of my pet theories, and I'm not an academic, is that if one can survive and overcome adversity at some levels, it prepares one for the next one and the next one and the
mm.
next one. And in my own life, that's very true. So I think it's a more complex situational question than just is it optimistic people who become heroic. Some people are quite negative, pessimistic, and yet display incredible acts of courage. Other people who you would think have everything going for them fail when the crunch comes. So
Mm.
I think it gets back to one's core values, beliefs, and all that sort of thing.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because I typically think of things through like a mathematical lens, and that's why
Mhm.
I bring up that optimism point of I think I'll say this maybe to be provocative, to be courageous, to take a courageous act in a moment, you have to believe, whether consciously, subconsciously, or however you get to it, that that act is going to lead to a better outcome. So
Yes.
you hear people say that, right? Like it's people don't like being called heroes. They don't think they're particularly brave or courageous. They just did the thing that made sense and they had to do.
Mhm.
And that's I think what I'm wondering and getting at is in the moment, in that action you take to be courageous, you is it true that, and we're kind of exploring here, right? Philosophically, would it have to be true that you only do that because you believe it's going to get you to a better outcome? If you didn't think
No,
it was going to help, then you wouldn't do it.
no, I disagree
Yeah.
because there's tremendous acts of courage which will lead to a better outcome for other people, but a very disastrous outcome for oneself. We go back to wartime situations, and there's many stories. I think some are true, some are perhaps mythical, of the guy that dives on a grenade to save the rest of his squad. Now he knows the outcome for him is not going to be good. In fact, it's going to be disastrous, but the outcome for his squad is going to be good. Right?
Mm.
We see
Yeah.
people put themselves in danger to rescue children because they believe what they're going to do, the outcome for the child will be good, but for them, maybe not.
Yeah.
So,
It starts to get to how what good is, right? Right.
yes,
Because I think what you're
yes.
saying is right. And maybe I'm reaching on this, but is it possible that that's the greater good for them? They feel like if I didn't dive on that grenade, if I didn't help those children, I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror. So I have,
Oh,
I have to
absolutely.
do this, you know?